He asked his little boy to choose him a perfect wife, but the child pointed at the maid, shocking everyone. Welcome to LessonLit, where we bring you the most powerful and emotional stories that touch the heart. If you enjoy stories about family, love, and life's unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. The Whitmore mansion shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its marble columns gleaming like ivory, its glass windows reflecting the garden's chandeliers that swayed in the breeze. Inside, a string quartet played an elegant waltz while the city's elite mingled with crystal flutes in hand, their laughter crisp and rehearsed. To the guests, this gathering was a glittering social occasion. To William Whitmore, it was a stage play he had rehearsed 1,000 times before. He stood in his tailored black suit, every button fastened, every strand of hair in place, composure clinging to him like armor. His father, Jorge Whitmore, prowled the edges of the ballroom like a hawk guarding its prey. His silver hair was combed back with military precision, his jaw hard, his eyes sharp. He had been repeating the same mantra to William for years. A CEO needs stability, a prestigious wife, a flawless family image. William heard it so many times that the words seemed carved into his bones. Yet he had never believed them. His father didn't care about love. He cared about headlines, mergers, appearances, and tonight was Jorge's plan in motion. A parade of glittering women, each hand-picked for her pedigree, elegance, and social worthiness. They circled William like planets around a star, smiling too brightly, angling for his attention. One leaned in, her perfume overwhelming. Another brushed her hand across his sleeve as if by accident. To the outside world, this would look like a celebration of power, but William's eyes weren't on him. He kept scanning the room, searching for only one thing. The 6-year-old boy darting between chairs with a laugh too big for the hushed chamber music. "General Noah to the rescue," the child shouted, a white tablecloth tied around his shoulders like a superhero's cape. He climbed onto a chair, leapt into a pile of velvet pillows, and held up 2 plastic spoons like swords. "Emergency! The ice cream is melting. I'll save it." Guests gasped as he barreled past them, nearly toppling a tower of macarons. Some forced smiles, others raised their brows in horror. To them, he was a disruption. To William, he was life itself, the one reason he hadn't drowned completely in his father's world of image and cold perfection. A blonde socialite crouched down, her sequined dress catching the light. "Wouldn't you like an elegant mother like me, darling?" she purred. Noah cocked his head, unimpressed. "I'd rather have a rocket that shoots marshmallows." He giggled and dashed toward the garden. Out back in a warm makeshift kitchen filled with the smell of butter and strawberries, Eliza Martinez fought a pot of bubbling sauce that hissed like a volcano. Her dark hair was pinned up hastily, strands falling into her face. Flour dusted her cheek. She was exhausted. 3 events in 1 day, rent due in 2 days. But she still hummed softly as she stirred. A small tug on her apron startled her. She turned, expecting a waiter, but found Noah grinning with spoons dangling from his ears. "Hi, I'm Noah. Do you have pancakes?" Eliza blinked. "Not on the menu, but pancakes are my secret specialty, with syrup, like this one, if it doesn't erupt first." She nodded at the bubbling pot. 10 minutes later, Noah sat on a wooden crate like a king on his throne, devouring a tower of golden pancakes dripping with strawberries and whipped cream. "These are the best pancakes in the whole universe," he declared, read solemnly. "And I've had pancakes made with corn chips once." Eliza laughed, wiping sauce from her cheek. "Well, I only yell when the rent's due." Inside, William watched them through the glass doors. His son's laughter rang out, wild and free, a sound he hadn't heard in so long. He raised his champagne glass to the socialites who still circled him, but his eyes kept drifting back to the kitchen. He realized he was holding his breath. As the sun lowered and the chandeliers flickered on, William finally crouched beside Noah. "So, champ, what do you think? Which one of these ladies would you like to be your new mom?" Noah scanned the crowd. Sequins, perfume, polished smiles. Then, with a sudden burst of certainty, he raised his spoon scepter and pointed toward the catering tent. "Her, the pancake queen." The garden froze. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered. One socialite choked on a canapé. All eyes turned to Eliza, who stood in the doorway with whipped cream in her hair and a spatula clutched like a weapon. Jorge's cane struck the marble floor, his voice slicing through the silence. "An employee? My grandson chose a maid?" Eliza's chin lifted. "I didn't manipulate him. I listened to him. I cared. Something I don't see anyone else here doing." Murmurs spread like wildfire. William's chest tightened. The fortress of appearances his father had built was cracking before everyone's eyes, and the one holding the pieces together was not a socialite in a diamond necklace, but a maid with flour on her cheek and fire in her voice. He looked at her, then at his son. Inside, he already knew what he had to do. "Miss Martinez," William said softly, his voice steadier than he felt. "May I speak with you privately?" The music faltered. Guests leaned closer, hungry for scandal. Eliza blinked, nodded, and followed him toward the fountain. Behind them, gossip swirled like a storm cloud, and Jorge's glare burned into William's back. "I thought I was hosting auditions for a wife. I didn't realize my son had already chosen the leading lady, and now everything is about to change." The morning sunlight streamed through the colossal glass windows of the Whitmore mansion, spilling across polished marble floors that gleamed like they had been scrubbed with liquid silver. The chandeliers still glistened from the gala the night before, but the house felt strangely hollow, as if the laughter and chatter of the city's elite had evaporated with the night air. Eliza stood at the entrance, clutching a battered suitcase that looked painfully out of place against the gold-leaf doors. The wheels squeaked as she rolled it across the stone, and she found herself whispering, "This isn't a house. It's a shopping mall." The massive oak door opened without a sound, and there was Winston, the Whitmore family's butler, tall and severe, with posture so straight he looked carved from marble himself. "Miss Eliza Martinez, I presume?" His accent was polished, each syllable clipped with precision. His eyes flickered down to her worn bag, then back up, betraying the faintest arch of disapproval. Eliza forced a smile, clutching her luggage tighter. "That's me, and no need to carry it, it's light. Just a couple of dresses and some flannel pajamas with taco prints." The butler's eyebrow twitched. He took the bag anyway, holding it between two fingers as if it might stain his suit. Without a word, he turned and motioned for her to follow. The grand entry hall swallowed her whole. Two sweeping staircases curved up to a landing where portraits of stern Whitmore ancestors glared down. They all seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." Eliza's throat tightened, but she kept her chin high. "Wow," she muttered. "Even stomach growls must echo in here." Winston paused, frowning. "Pardon, miss?" "Nothing," she said quickly, forcing a polite smile. Before Winston could comment, a shout cracked through the still air. "General Noah, reporting for duty!" Noah came sliding down the polished banister, arms outstretched, his spaceship pajamas flapping like battle colors. He landed in a heap at Eliza's feet, then stood proudly, a plastic spoon dangling from each ear. "You came!" he exclaimed, leaping into her arms. His small arms squeezed her neck, sticky with syrup from last night's adventure. For a second, Eliza forgot she was the help. She was just someone being hugged by a little boy who needed her. "I told you, General," she whispered, hugging him tighter. "A promise is a promise." He grinned, tugging her hand. "Come on, I'll show you your room. It's right next to mine. It has a bathtub that's bigger than a swimming pool." They hurried upstairs, Winston trailing behind like a shadow with her bag. Hallway after hallway stretched out before them, lined with more doors than she could count. Noah guided her with the confidence of a child leading an expedition. "That's the formal living room. That's the informal living room. Oh, and we have 3 libraries, but don't go in Dad's. It's just boring business books." Eliza laughed as they reached her room. The door opened to reveal a space bigger than her entire apartment. Vaulted ceilings, a 4-poster bed, French windows opening to a garden view that looked painted by angels. She collapsed backward onto the feather mattress, her taco print pajamas peeking from her bag. "This place is insane," she murmured. "Where's the bathroom? Or is there a separate one for the curtains?" As if on cue, Noah pressed a golden button. The curtains swept open automatically. "Magic!" he shouted. Later, Noah returned to her room, still in his pajamas. His hair stuck up like a crown, his little eyes wide with anticipation. "Alyssa, it's time," he whispered. "Time for magic pancakes." "General," she said, groaning, "it's 7 a.m. Even the birds are still asleep." "The birds are lazy. Pancakes now." She laughed despite herself. "Fine, but you're helping this time." In the kitchen, Eliza poured batter into a hot skillet, showing Noah how to swirl the pan just right. He tried, nearly spilling half of it onto the floor, then managed a clumsy flip. The pancake stuck to the chandelier. Noah gasped. "Yes! Now it's a space pancake." He laughed so hard his little body shook. Unseen, William leaned against the doorway, still in his suit, his tie hanging loose. He hadn't heard Noah laugh like that in months, not since Sarah. For a moment, the weight of board meetings and shareholder reports slipped away, and he almost smiled. Almost. By midday, the mansion filled again with perfume and diamonds. The women returned armed with charm and gifts. A blonde leaned down, flashing a rehearsed smile. "Wouldn't you like me to be your mother, darling?" I'd rather have a rocket that shoots marshmallows, Noah replied, licking syrup from his fingers. The room chuckled politely, but their eyes betrayed annoyance. Then, as if guided by something greater, Noah climbed onto a chair, pointed his sticky spoon toward the catering tent, and shouted, "Her! I want the pancake queen to be my mom!" The crystal music shattered into silence. A glass slipped and exploded on the marble floor. Veronica Sterling's smile faltered. Jorge's cane struck the ground, sharp and angry. "A maid?" he thundered. "My grandson has chosen a maid?" Eliza froze where she stood, spatula still in hand. Color flushed across her cheeks. "I didn't trick him," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I was kind to him. I listened, that's all. Something no one else in this room thought to do." A murmur spread through the guests. Veronica's lips curled in disdain. Jorge's glare could cut glass. William felt his father's world pressing down on him, demanding he laugh it off, dismiss it, fix the scene. But then Noah tugged at his hand, eyes shining with innocence and certainty. "Daddy, I want her. She's the one." William raised his glass, forcing a calm smile, though his heart was hammering. He turned toward Eliza, who stood tall despite the whispers slicing at her like knives. "Miss Martinez," he said quietly, "would you grant me a word? In private?" The garden stilled, anticipation crackling in the air like a storm about to break. Jorge's stare followed them as William led Eliza toward the fountain, Noah skipping at their side in his makeshift cape. Behind them, the socialites leaned together, their voices a sharp, poisonous hiss. No one knew it yet, but this small walk into the fading light was the beginning of something that would shake the Whitmore empire to its core. The sun had barely climbed to its highest point when the mansion began to stir again. Fresh roses filled the marble vases, servants rushed about replacing linens, and silver trays clinked as they were carried into the dining room. To anyone passing by, the Whitmore estate looked like a palace ready to host royalty, yet within its walls, tension hung heavier than the velvet curtains. For Eliza, the grandeur of it all hadn't dulled the heaviness in her chest. She had only been here one night, but the place already felt like a cage made of glass and chandeliers. Last night's gala replayed in her mind, the moment Noah had declared her his pancake queen in front of the entire city's elite, the way Jorge's voice cracked like thunder when he called her a manipulator, and William's unreadable eyes as he pulled her aside. Still, a promise was a promise. She had told Noah she would stay, and so here she was, apron tied tight, sleeves rolled up, standing in the gleaming kitchen where even the refrigerator had a keypad. Noah padded in, still barefoot, hair sticking in all directions like he'd been through a storm. He clutched a crayon drawing in his small hands, his face glowing with mischief. "Elisa," he whispered, as though sharing a secret with a fellow soldier. "We need pancakes. Now. The general is hungry." Eliza arched an eyebrow, trying to fight her smile. "General, it's not even breakfast yet. It's barely morning." "The birds are awake," he insisted, pointing dramatically toward the window where a sparrow had just landed on the fountain. "They already ate. We're behind schedule." She laughed, shaking her head. "Fine, but you're helping. Every good general needs a partner." She tied one of Winston's spare aprons around his tiny waist, the fabric dragging on the floor, and handed him a whisk. He gripped it with exaggerated seriousness, whipping the batter as if he were saving the world. The pan sizzled, butter bubbling gold. Eliza poured a ladle of batter, gave the skillet a swift flick, and sent the pancakes soaring into the air. Noah gasped, eyes wide with wonder. "It's flying," he shouted. "It's called a flip," she corrected with a grin. "You just have to trust gravity to bring it back, unless it decides to stick to the ceiling and become a chandelier pancake." As if on cue, the pancake slapped against the crystal fixture and clung there, steaming like a flag of victory. Noah burst out laughing so hard he nearly toppled off the stool. "Yes, it's official. We have a pet pancake." Unbeknownst to them, William stood just outside the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, the other holding his coffee cup. His father's words from the night before still rang in his head. Stability, appearances, reputation. But here was Noah, his laughter spilling through the kitchen, louder and more honest than it had been in years. William's lips curved, though he caught himself quickly, swallowing the smile before anyone noticed. Almost. By noon, the socialites had returned in a cloud of perfume and sequins. They drifted into the garden like peacocks, all polished smiles and rehearsed compliments. William let them orbit around him, nodding politely while hiding his fatigue. He could feel his father's eyes on him from across the lawn, sharp and expectant. Noah, however, was not playing along. With syrup still on his cheeks from breakfast, he darted into the ballroom mid-toast. The child wore his makeshift cape again, brandishing a plastic spoon as if it were a sword. "Make way for General Noah," he shouted, leaping onto a settee and scattering pillows like shrapnel. The women gasped, One tried to pat his head and got whipped cream splattered on her silk gown. Another forced a laugh, though her eyes burned with irritation. Not one bent to his level, not one even tried to understand. William watched, torn between amusement and dread, when Noah climbed onto a chair and raised his syrup-sticky spoon. "I choose her," he announced in a voice that rang through the glittering hall. "The pancake queen will be my new mom." The music screeched to a halt. A champagne glass slipped from a hand and shattered. Whispers flared like sparks in dry grass. Veronica Sterling, flawless in her diamond necklace, froze mid-step, her painted smile stiffening. And then Jorge's cane struck the marble, the sound like a gavel calling order in a courtroom. "What nonsense is this? My grandson chooses a maid?" His voice was cold, filled with judgment. Eliza emerged from the kitchen, flour still on her cheek, spatula in hand. For a heartbeat, she looked as though she might shrink under the stairs, but instead she lifted her chin, her brown eyes steady. "With all due respect, sir," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "I didn't trick him. I was kind to him. I listened. I gave him what he asked for. A pancake. Something no one else here thought to do." The guests murmured, scandal rippling through the room. Veronica's lips curled, and she muttered to the woman beside her, "A maid? Really?" William's jaw tightened. His father's glare burned like ice, but his son's small hand clutched his sleeve with unshakable trust. For the first time in years, William felt the walls of this perfect facade closing in, and something deep inside him urged him to break them down. He turned to Eliza, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the weight of his father's judgment. "Miss Martinez," he said, steady now, his voice cutting through the silence. "May I speak with you in private?" Eliza's eyes widened. She nodded slowly, still clutching the spatula like a shield. Together, with Noah trotting close behind, they walked toward the fountain in the garden. The chandeliers glimmered behind them, the murmurs of gossip swelling in their wake. Noah glanced up at his father, then at Eliza. "Are we in trouble?" he whispered. William didn't answer. He just kept walking, the air heavy with unspoken words, the storm of his father's wrath gathering behind them. What none of the glittering guests could see was that in this moment, quiet, fragile, and full of fire, the future of the Whitmore family was beginning to change forever. The Whitmore mansion was a palace of marble and glass, but on that particular evening, it felt more like a stage where every actor knew their role, except for the two people who had never asked to be part of the performance. Eliza had spent most of the afternoon in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming a tune her grandmother used to sing. The melody was soft, lilting, like sunlight catching in a glass of water. She tried to lose herself in the rhythm, scrubbing dishes with soap bubbles clinging to her fingers, because the silence that had settled in the house after last night's explosive scene was unbearable. Since the gala, everything had shifted. The lively laughter that Noah once filled the halls with had dimmed into quiet whispers. He no longer darted around the garden in his superhero cape. He no longer plotted daring pancake missions or invited her to play spy games. Instead, he lingered in corners with his crayons, drawing little battle plans of a world where kindness still triumphed. Even Winston, usually stoic and inscrutable, carried trays with heavier footsteps, as though the house itself had swallowed his spirit. William had withdrawn into his office. His presence was there but muted, like a shadow on the edge of her vision. He no longer lingered in doorways when she cooked. He no longer looked at her with that almost smile. At breakfast, he spoke to her with polite formality, as if he were speaking to a board member rather than the woman who had promised his son pancakes every Sunday. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. She had reminded herself again and again, this was temporary, just 2 weeks, just a job. But when she began folding her clothes into her suitcase, her chest tightened with every shirt she folded. 2 weeks had seemed manageable when she was negotiating with William by the fountain. Now it felt like a countdown to heartbreak. The scrape of small slippers on marble made her glance at the doorway. Noah stood there, his hair messy from a nap, his arms wrapped around his stuffed astronaut bear. His voice was small, quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Alyssa, why are you packing?" She froze, clutching the worn fabric of her favorite shirt. "Good morning, General," she said softly, forcing a smile. "I'm just organizing my things." His little brows knit together. "That's not organizing, that's leaving." She knelt down to meet his wide, watery eyes. "I told you I'd be here for a little while, remember? Well, that little while might be almost up." "No," he cried, rushing forward and wrapping his tiny arms around her legs. "You can't leave. You're my almost mom. You promised pancakes forever." Eliza felt her throat tighten. She brushed a tear from her cheek quickly, not wanting him to see her crumble. "Noah, sweetheart, I do love you. More than you know. but sometimes grown-ups make things complicated. His lip trembled. Is it because of Daddy? Because you yelled at him? Her eyes widened. You heard that? I heard everything, Noah whispered. But you don't have to go. You can just say sorry. Winston told me when we fight, we say sorry and then we're okay again. I said sorry when I wore socks on my head, and he forgave me. She almost laughed, even as her heart broke. Oh, Noah, grown-up fights aren't always that simple. But the boy's face hardened with a seriousness that looked far too old for 6 years. If you leave, I'm coming with you. I don't care about the mansion or the toys. You need me too. I'll take care of you. Eliza's breath caught. She wanted to tell him no, that he was just a child. But the determination in his eyes was the same fire she had seen when he crowned himself General Noah with spoons dangling from his ears. She couldn't find the words to undo it. At breakfast the next morning, the tension was thicker than the syrup on Noah's pancakes. William sat at the head of the long table, cutting his food with precision, answering his son in clipped words. Noah pushed scrambled eggs around his plate, shoulders slumped. Champ, you need to eat, William said, his voice firmer than he intended. I'm not hungry, Noah whispered, then louder with a sharpness that startled even Winston. Why do grown-ups always care more about rules than about me? The knife froze in William's hand. He looked at his son, but before he could answer, the click of high heels echoed across the marble floor. The sound was sharp, deliberate, like gunfire. Veronica Sterling appeared in the doorway, every inch of her draped in designer fabric, her golden hair gleaming under the chandelier. Even at 9 in the morning, she wore diamond earrings that sparkled like tiny stars. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head with a theatrical flourish. William, darling, she purred, ignoring Eliza entirely. I simply couldn't stay away. We need to talk, alone. She finally glanced at Eliza, her lips curling in a sugary smile. And who's this? Oh, the help. How quaint. Before Eliza could speak, Noah shot up from his chair. She's not the help, he shouted, his voice echoing through the dining room. She's my almost mom. She makes pancakes that fly, and she listens. His little chest heaved with emotion, his eyes shining with tears he refused to let fall. Veronica froze, her smile faltering, then hardening into ice. William set down his silverware slowly, his jaw tightening as he looked from his son to Eliza. He had wanted order, a controlled audition, a simple solution. But now, with his son standing there in a syrup-stained pajama top, pointing to a maid as though she were royalty, he realized the performance was over. The mask had cracked. The question wasn't whether appearances mattered. The question was whether William was finally ready to stop living for his father's empire and start living for love. And somewhere in the shadows of the hall, Jorge Whitmore stood watching, his jaw tight, his eyes cold and unreadable. Something was coming, something that would test every boundary they had drawn. The days after Veronica's outburst were like winter settling inside the Whitmore mansion. The grand halls, once filled with laughter and the sound of Noah's makeshift superhero missions, now echoed with silence. The boy's cape, once a blur of red across marble floors, hung limp on the banister. Even Winston, usually so composed, moved with a heaviness as though carrying a secret weight with every polished tray. Eliza felt the change most of all. She kept her promise to Noah. She stayed, but each morning she folded a little more of her life into her battered suitcase, just in case. Every shirt she tucked away was a reminder that she didn't belong here, that her time was borrowed. Alyssa? Noah's small voice startled her one morning. He stood in the doorway of her enormous guest room, his hair messy, eyes wide and wounded. Why are you packing? She froze mid-fold, her hands gripping the soft fabric of her faded dress. Oh, hi, General, she said with a smile that felt brittle. I'm just organizing my things. He stepped closer, clutching his astronaut bear, his little face crumpling. No, you're leaving. I heard you and Daddy last night. You're mad at him, but you can't go. His voice cracked. You promised me pancakes forever. Her heart tightened. She knelt to his level, brushing his tear-streaked cheek with her unbandaged hand. Sweetheart, I love you more than you know. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they make things harder than they should be. He sniffled. If you go, I'm going with you. You need me too. I'll help pay rent. I can sell pancakes at the park. He held up a crayon drawing of a stand with the words pancakes for $1 scribbled across it. Eliza's chest ached. She wanted to tell him he was just a child, but when she looked into his eyes, filled with that stubborn fire, she could only whisper, Oh, Noah. By evening, the tension cracked wider. The dining hall was a scene out of a magazine spread, polished silverware, starched linens, and candles flickering in crystal holders. Eliza stood at the head of the table, orchestrating the service with quiet grace. Noah sat slumped at the table, his little hands pushing scrambled eggs in circles. William sat at the head, posture straighter than usual, voice clipped, eyes fixed anywhere but on her. And Tiwo, hen, heels, sharp staccato clicks across marble. Veronica Sterling swept into the dining room like a storm in couture. Her designer gown shimmered under the chandelier, and she carried a gift bag adorned with gold foil. "William, darling," she purred, leaning forward to kiss the air beside his cheek. "I couldn't stay away. I've been thinking about us, about what we had." She let her voice trail, heavy with suggestion, before turning to Noah. "And you, my sweet little prince." She reached for his hair with a manicured hand. Noah recoiled, pressing closer to Eliza. "Hi," he said softly, his eyes fixed on his plate. "Oh, how shy," Veronica cooed, before her tone hardened. "But we'll work on that. A boy of your background needs discipline, structure, not chaos." Her gaze flicked toward Eliza, her smile stiff, and certainly not the kind of influences that make him run barefoot through the house. Noah froze. "I had shoes on," he whispered. "Shoes with dust on them," she shot back, lowering her voice but not her disdain. No proper mother would let her child behave like a street urchin. Eliza's hand stilled over the serving tray. She turned slowly, her face pale, eyes flashing with heat. "Excuse me?" Veronica arched a brow. "You heard me, dear. Don't think a few pancakes make you fit for this family. William deserves someone of his world. And Noah," she glanced at him, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "deserves better." Eliza set the tray down with a thud that echoed through the room. She stepped forward, standing tall despite the whispers spreading like wildfire around them. "Listen carefully. I don't care how much your shoes cost or how many diamonds are around your neck. You don't get to call a 6-year-old boy a street urchin, not while I'm standing here, not ever." Gasps filled the dining hall. One guest nearly dropped her fork. Winston stiffened but didn't intervene. Veronica's painted smile shattered. "How dare you speak to me like that? You're nothing but—" She caught herself, her eyes darting toward Jorge, who was standing in the doorway, face carved from granite. "An employee. You don't get to dictate anything in this house." Noah's chair screeched as he stood on it, fists clenched. She's my mom, and you're just mean." "Enough!" Jorge's voice exploded like a gunshot. The entire room fell silent. He advanced with the slow, deliberate steps of a judge walking to the bench. "William, you will end this nonsense at once. Get rid of her, or I will strip you of everything. Your position, your inheritance, your legacy. You will be left with nothing but your pride." Eliza felt her stomach drop. She turned to William, her voice shaking. "You don't have to say it. I'll pack my things. I understand." But William didn't let go of his son's hand. His eyes burned with conflict, yet beneath the storm was something steady, something fierce. He looked at his father and then back at Eliza. His throat tightened, but his voice was clear. "Dad," he said, "maybe losing everything isn't the worst thing that could happen." The room gasped again. Jorge's jaw locked. Veronica's lips parted in shock. Noah's eyes went wide with hope. Eliza stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in the history of the Whitmore mansion, the carefully polished walls seemed to tremble, not from the chandeliers, not from the music, but from the weight of truth breaking through the lies. And deep inside, William knew. The game had changed forever. The Whitmore mansion had seen its share of glittering soirees and ruthless boardroom victories, but never had its halls held such quiet anticipation. 3 months had passed since the night of the ultimatum, and everything had changed. Where once the air smelled of cold marble and polished silver, it now carried the warmth of butter and syrup. Pancakes had somehow replaced cigars as the household's signature scent. Noah's laughter, once rare and fragile, now echoed daily, a soundtrack to a home that finally felt alive. But with joy came defiance. Jorge Whitmore had not softened easily. For weeks, he raged like a storm, threatening to cut William off, vowing the empire would crumble if tarnished by scandal. Yet the more he fought, the more unshakable William became, standing taller with every word. "Father, I don't need an empire if I lose my son's happiness," he repeated until Jorge's fury was exhausted. And now, on a day filled with strings of fairy lights and sun-dappled gardens, the mansion prepared for a spectacle none of its walls had ever witnessed. Not a gala of prestige, but a wedding of the heart. Guests arrived in a curious mix. Board members in Armani suits sat beside Eliza's old catering colleagues in thrift store dresses. Socialites clutched their pearls as children darted past with balloon swords. Winston, immaculate in his tuxedo, orchestrated everything with military precision, though his eyes gleamed with rare emotion. At the center of it all, Eliza stood before a mirror in the guest room that had once felt like a gilded prison. The woman staring back at her wore a simple lace gown, second-hand, lovingly altered by her best friend Jessica. It wasn't couture, but it was hers. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the veil, her breath catching as the weight of what was about to happen finally struck. "Jess," she whispered, eyes glassy, "do you think I really belong here, in this house, in this world?" Jessica grinned, straightening the gown's hem. "You belong with the people who love you, and from what I see, that boy and his father would trade every diamond in this mansion just to keep you." On the other side of the house, William paced his study, tie undone, heart thundering. Thomas, improbably his best man after months of awkward history, leaned against the desk watching with a smirk. "You're sweating like you're about to face a hostile takeover," Thomas teased. "This is bigger," William admitted. "This isn't business. This is my life. What if I can't give her the happiness she deserves?" Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "You've already given her something money can't buy. A family. Trust me, that's enough." The music began outside, soft guitar strums replacing the cold string quartets of past galas. Guests rose, turning toward the garden archway woven with fresh daisies. Noah marched proudly down the aisle first, wearing a tiny tuxedo and carrying the rings like a soldier on parade. But halfway down, he couldn't resist adding a dramatic spin, drawing laughter from the crowd. And then, Eliza. She walked alone, her head high, her steps steady. She didn't need an escort, she wasn't being given away. She was choosing this boy, this man, this life. The garden seemed to hush as she reached William, his eyes shining with awe and relief. "You look," he began, voice thick with emotion. "Don't say perfect," she whispered with a mischievous smile. "Just say me." He chuckled, his nerves breaking, and took her hands. The officiant spoke of love, family, and the courage it takes to defy expectation. When it was William's turn to speak, his voice shook but never faltered. "Eliza, months ago I thought love was a deal, an arrangement. I thought family was something you displayed like a trophy. Then you came into our lives with your pancakes, your laughter, and your fierce honesty. You taught me that family isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to love every single day. You gave my son a mother, and you gave me a reason to finally live with truth. I promise to stand by you, even when the pancakes stick to the ceiling, even when the world disapproves, because you are my home." Tears streaked Eliza's face as she spoke her vows. "William, I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged. I was just a girl trying to survive, paying rent, keeping promises. But you and Noah, you gave me a family. I promised to love you both fiercely, to protect our home with every ounce of my stubbornness, and to make pancakes every Sunday until we're old and gray." The crowd laughed through tears. Noah, beaming, shouted, "And don't forget whipped cream." But before the officiant could pronounce them husband and wife, a cane struck the stone path. Gasps swept through the guests as Jorge stepped forward, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. The music stilled, the air froze. William's hand tightened around Eliza's. "Father," William said evenly, "this isn't your stage, please don't." But Jorge raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes lingered on Eliza, then Noah, then finally his son. His voice was softer than anyone expected. "For months, I fought this. I called it madness, manipulation, a scandal. But what I see here today," his voice cracked, and for the first time, the Iron Man of the Whitmore Empire looked human. "I see my grandson happy. I see my son alive again. And I see a woman with the courage to challenge me when I was wrong. Eliza, you gave this family back its heart. If William chooses you, then so do I." A collective gasp rippled through the garden. Eliza blinked, stunned. William's throat tightened as Noah leapt forward, throwing his arms around his grandfather. "See, Grandpa? I told you pancakes fix everything." Laughter broke through the crowd. Jorge actually smiled, a small, weary smile, but real. "Perhaps they do," he admitted. The officiant cleared his throat. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." William kissed Eliza, and the garden erupted in applause. Noah danced around them, shouting, "Best family ever!" Winston discreetly dabbed at his eye with a white handkerchief, though no one dared mention it. As music swelled and guests moved to the pancake station Eliza had insisted on, William whispered against her ear, "How does it feel, Mrs. Whitmore?" She smiled through tears, resting her forehead against his. Like every hard day was worth it, just to get to this one. And with that, the empire built on appearances gave way to something stronger: love, laughter, and pancakes for life.